So hey guys, welcome back to another video. This video is on what is microservice architecture and what is a monolith architecture and what are its advantages and disadvantages. So first thing is, let's understand what is a monolith architecture. So let me draw a diagram for you. So if you see, there are multiple desktops. Okay, so just consider this as a desktop. Okay, desktop or whatever, a laptop or something like that. And then we have our monolith service. Okay, so let's suppose that this is a monolith service. Then we have our database. So what happens, these are multiple network calls that are getting called over monolith service, and that monolith service communicates with our database. So this is a DB. Okay, now many of you might be thinking that a monolith service means that we have deployed everything in a single machine and that gets communicated with our database, but that's not the case. What happens is there can be multiple service. Our code can be deployed to multiple machines. Let's say this is M1, M2 and M3, and there can be multiple databases. Monolith means so let me just write here monolith. Okay, so monolith means that the architecture of our code is monolithic, which means our entire code base, entire logic lies in a single service. Okay, we are not creating multiple service for which communicates with each other over network calls. That is not happening. Okay, so there is a single service which is running on these all machines. So this can be distributed via load balancer or something like that. Okay, now what is a microservice? Let me just okay, so what is a microservice? So microservice architecture, let's suppose that these are the machines, laptops or whatever devices that we are using, and now there are multiple services. Let's suppose these are the servers that we have deployed, and each server contains some services. Let's suppose S1, S2, S3, S4, S5, and these services communicate with each other. Okay, this communication can be in cross fashion or whatever. So any service can communicate with any one of them. Okay, and these machines get called via gateway. So here is a gateway. This is a gateway. Ignore my drawing, please. Okay, so this is a gateway, and this gateway distributes load according to the type of service that call should be going to. So, and there are multiple databases. I mean instance of the DBs. Okay, so these service S2 can communicate with D1, S3 can communicate with database 2, S4 can communicate with database 3. Now what is happening in microservice architecture? Our code architecture is such that we have separated the type of service which should not depend on each other. Like let's suppose that if S1 is deployed alone, it doesn't depend on S2, and same goes for other. Now these communicate with each other, and our gateway talks to microservices internally. So let's suppose that if this device just needs a chat service, it will navigate that to chat service, that call to chat service. So this is a microservice architecture. Our code base is microservice actually. Now what are the advantages and disadvantages of my monolith first? Okay, so first let's start with the monolith. So first is, of course, it requires small team. So it is good for small companies. Okay, so if you have a small team, this architecture is best for you because it doesn't require much complex setup. Okay, the second point is it's less complex, of course. So it's less complex. Third point is duplication is less. Okay, as we are maintaining a single service, so there is no code duplication. Like in microservice, we might require the code duplication for let's suppose that there are .env files or the initial code setup. Even that is a duplication that we require in microservice, but not here. Fourth point is this is faster actually. The computation is faster because there are no API calls or there are no network calls that are happening. Like in case of microservice, there were many network calls that were happening, like API calls or some whatever you say. So this is faster because no API calls, no network calls. Disadvantages of monolith. These are advantages. Let me just write it. Advantages. Okay. Now disadvantages of monolith. Okay. So the first is, of course, if new member joins, if new joining, it's really hard to explain in the whole code base because the code gets complex. So that is first disadvantage. Second is deployment is complicated. This is complicated because whenever you do a, let's suppose if even if you change a single file in this monolith architecture, you have to redeploy whole system, which is a time-taking process, and this is also a second disadvantage. Third is, of course, a single point of failure, so SPOF, because let's suppose that there is any error in your code base in or in any service inside this monolith architecture. You have all of the machines, like there were this, see, M1, M2 and M3, these all machines where monolith code is running, every machine will get failed or every service will get down. So that is a single point of failure. Okay, now let's talk about microservice advantages. Microservice architecture advantages. Okay, so first is let me just draw a diagram for this. Where it is? This is a gateway. These are, let's suppose, sort of services. First is chat service, analytics, and profile, user. Okay, this contains sign up login, or you can write auth service. Okay, also here is our database. So for chat we have a separate database, for analytics we have a separate database, for profile and this we have a separate DB. Okay, the gateway, this talks to the services. Okay, and this is our machines that are communicating with gateway. Now what are the advantages of this type of system? So this is a microservice that we have distributed, we have separated out chat service, analytics, profile. So these are individual service that are not tightly coupled. These are loose coupled service. Now first let's talk about advantages of this. Okay, advantages of this microservice architecture. First is it's easy to scale. As you can see, let me just write first, easy to scale. So as you can see, all the services are separated out. Now let's suppose that we have two machines, two instances of chat running. Okay, so let's suppose there are two instances of chat service getting run. Now let's suppose that there are many people recently that are having new messages, like let's say there is this Diwali celebration coming, and people are just sending text messages to each other like Happy Diwali and all. So in that, what we can do, we can scale it individually. So what we can do, we can run many instances of just chat service and no need to scale the whole system. So while in monolith architecture, we needed to scale the whole system, which is again not. It's actually a time taking, and it costs a lot because everything will happen. Okay. Now second point is it's easy for new joinee to understand. Okay. So whenever a new joinee joins your company, what happens? He just need to know about the service he's working on. Let's suppose that he's working on an analytics service. He just need to be aware of the code that is in the analytics service. He doesn't need to bother about chat, profile, or user service or authentication service. Third point is working in parallel. Okay, so team can work in parallel, which means the guys, those who are working on profile service, no need for them to wait for the guys that are working on analytics service to get finished, and after that only they can work. It's not like that. They can work on the individual services. Fourth point is disadvantage. Disadvantage is just one disadvantage, that this require skilled architect, because this type of service is not easy to design. You should be aware that what services might get more load and what services should be separated out, because this type of microservice architecture should be designed properly so that it can be scaled accordingly afterwards. Now, for monolith architecture, you might be aware of this Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow is a good example of monolith architecture, because so Stack Overflow uses monolith architecture. Okay. Beside for microservice architecture, of course, all the new companies I would say all the big tech giants like Google, FB, Facebook, and all new companies over the market like OLX, Uber, these all uses microservice architecture. Okay, this is the even if you are designing any architecture for any company, you should prefer for microservice architecture. In most of the case, that will be suffice. But in some cases where the company is small, you should go with monolith. Okay, so that's it. Thank you.